Howdy, Wolfpack fans. Another edition of Ramey's Pregame Pod. You are hopefully enjoying this on Saturday morning ahead of Nevada's home game against Oregon State. Kickoff coming up at 4:30 Pacific time. The Hall of Famer Mike Edwards and Alex Margulies and I will start our coverage at 3:30 on the Bud Light Tailgate Show from Mackey Stadium. As you can see behind me, beautiful conditions in the Truckee Meadows, and we look forward to another great day and a celebration of the sesquicentennial, the 150th birthday of the University of Nevada. So big celebration day on this Saturday. Coming up on the pod, the longtime play-by-play voice and great friend of ours from Oregon State, Mike Parker, will visit with us. Our paths with Mike initially crossed back in 2010, covering college baseball in the Pac-12. And, of course, the Beavers and the Pack have met in football since my tenure began here with the Silver and Blue, and they have played several times in baseball. So Mike and I always enjoy catching up. And we also check in with Mountain West insider Terrence Newman. So first up, Mike Parker, longtime play-by-play voice of the Beavers. Mike, forgive me, I didn't look it up before we started this. What year is this for you with the Beavers?
26, and in fact, my very first game, John, was at Mackey Stadium in 1999. I called the game that was Dennis Erickson's first game. Oh. I think Dennis's first game as the head coach of the Beavers was a little bit bigger of an event in the overall scheme of things than my own calling the game, but you know how it is in this business. I look back as not only Dennis's first game, but it was mine, and the Beavers prevailed 28-13.
The last few years have been interesting for everybody who loves college football, and specifically for those of us who love it in the West. How has it been on the ground with the Beavers? Because, you know, the Pac-12 essentially abandoned, or the teams that used to be in the Pac-12 abandoned the Beavers and Washington State, and then the scheduling alliance, and now this kind of rebirth of the Pac. How has it been just emotionally for the Beaver community?
Well, I'm not a big fan of roller coaster rides. My kids are, and so I went on a lot of them with them when they were younger. Okay, honey, I'd ask my wife, can you take her? No. So roller coaster ride, never a big fan. And I've not been a big fan of this one either. It has been, and that's one analogy, but another, it feels like we've just been in a long fight, kind of a, last year about this time, and 2 years ago, too, when USC and UCLA first left, I remember saying to Jonathan Smith, our head coach then, I walked into his office the next day and said, well, what do you think, Jonathan? And he was right on it when he said, well, the survivability of the conference is at stake. And he said that the day USC and USC left, USC and the Bruins left, and he said there's maybe a 50-50 chance it even survives after the next 2 or 3 years. So Jonathan right then was well aware of what that gigantic move by the LA schools meant for our conference. And then you fast forward to a year later when it's called around here Black Friday, and we play, I think we play Steely Dan almost every day on the show, sort of in tribute to it, at least not so much tribute, but recognition of a day that was not great for the history of our conference, when we supposedly went to sleep the night before on August 3rd with an agreement for an Apple streaming rights TV deal with the 10 schools that remain. And let's just say things happened overnight the next morning that indicated, that ain't happening. And the conference fell apart, and then Stanford and Cal a couple of weeks later. So it's been tough. It just felt like the old Batman TV shows, and I'm much older than you, so you may not remember the effects of bam, kapow, all the things that would come in that old Adam West show, bam, kapow. That type of thing is how it's felt, honestly, for a long time, until I think there's been some things trending in a better direction. So the ride we're not over. It's not over. And we still don't know what's next and what's going to happen. You asked, how's it been on the ground? It's been a tough couple of years in terms of the anxiety, the uncertainty. Where do we go from here? And I think things are shaping up. The rebuild's going reasonably well, all things considered, but there's still a lot of things to consider before it's said and done.
I do lament that it seems so often when folks like you and me talk about, what we should be talking about a game on Saturday, and instead we're talking about kind of the political realities of college athletics. I just have one more question on realignment and the Beavers, and then we can talk about the matchup. But Oregon State has the proudest baseball tradition in the 21st century on the West Coast. And the Pac-12 being such a robust baseball conference, the old Pac-12, was a real part of that. And so I have been quietly kind of mourning the what I see as almost an unavoidable tragedy for Oregon State baseball. The Beavers then have announced they'd be independent. Has there been any clarification about maybe the new Pac and a baseball league? Because again, Oregon State has 3 national championships in the 21st century, and it's kind of a program without a country or without a conference specifically.
You're right, John. You're right. And our paths have come together during Beavers and Nevada baseball, and that's going to continue. I would hope that whatever the scheduling alliance that Mitch Canham, the head coach now for the program, chooses in a sense to put together. When you say, has there been any clarification about the future path? 2 years of independence, just as it essentially is in football now. Now, the Beavers in basketball and other Olympic sports are members of the WCC now, and that begins this year, and eligible for those conference tournaments and postseason opportunities, et cetera. But in baseball, Mitch Canham looked at the WCC, looked at other opportunities and said our best path forward is to go independent. And so that'll happen for the next 2 years. I wouldn't be shocked if that continues to be the pattern. That's difficult. I mean, when you say you lament, believe me, there's been a lot of lamentation and mourning and hand-wringing about all this stuff, as we've already alluded to. Because you're right. You said, and I know you know this, but in terms of 3 national championships in this millennium, in this century, that's not only the best on the West Coast, that's the best in the country. And so this is a top brand program with national recognition and incredible success at the highest levels. And it is a shame that Mitch Canham and that proud program is thrown into the sense of how do we piece this or patch this in together. However, the schedule that the Beavers have put together for this year is good, with a lot of good teams. It's challenging. A lot of road games coming up in this coming season in respect to that, but then a lot of home games kind of in the following year. I don't know how it's all going to shake out, John. I do know that the Beavers in Nevada have had some good series, and the Beavers have had their stumbles at Peccole Park, and because of some quality program and baseball in your city and your university. But I'm expecting the Beavs to be able to piece it together as an independent, if necessary, because I don't see a path forward in this rebuilt Pac-12 that gives them, as you're suggesting, the same kind of level week in and week out of competition they had in the Pac-12.
Yeah, that was the first thing that honestly might have been the first thing I thought about when I saw the teams moving from the Mountain West. I thought, well, Boise State doesn't have baseball, Colorado State, Utah State,
right.
Obviously San Diego State and Fresno State, but yeah. Anyway, okay, let's move to this matchup. Bring us up to speed on first-year head coach Trent Bray and just kind of how the position. Take us through what's been going on with the Beavers head football coach and how you got to Trent Bray, who's 4-1 to start his Beaver tenure.
It's the best start for an Oregon State head coach since Lon Steiner back in 1933. In his first year, got out 4-0 and a tie. So this is the best start since then, and he's done remarkably well under these challenging circumstances, I think, John. This is a big game in that respect coming up this weekend. When I say under these circumstances, you're absolutely right. I don't know how many minutes we are into our conversation, but it takes us this long to even start talking about a football game. And that's been the nature of our lives together on our radio shows and all of that before we even start to, by the way, there is a game this weekend. Let's see who else has been invited. Let's see who else has said no. Let's see what litigation is going on. Let's see what's going on in Whitman County and what does Judge Lively say? Do we get a temporary restraining order? Do we get an injunction? Do we have a settlement? Oh, who are the Beavers playing this weekend? I mean, that's kind of how it's spelled. And in the midst of all of that, Trent Bray and his coaching staff, with a lot of Oregon State ties, which I think is more important than ever. Trent, a former Beaver, all Pac-10 player in his day, his father an assistant with Dennis Erickson and those outstanding Oregon State teams, and the D coordinator was Craig Bray for the Fiesta Bowl win over Notre Dame in that season. Trent has surrounded himself with like-minded people who love Corvallis, who love Oregon State, who know how to recruit, who know how to find the diamonds in the rough. The methodology, even in this era of nil and transfer portal and all of that, for Oregon State, well, it's different now. We all understand it's different. Nevertheless, the methodology of what Oregon State's always had to do to compete with the bigger markets in the Pac-10 before nil was a thing, when things were going on perhaps nefariously at certain places, you still had to find ways to compete and find talent and develop that talent that just to stay viable. And the Beavers have been more than viable in this century. First with Dennis Erickson, Mike Riley had a lot of good teams, and Trent Bray knows how to build teams and develop players. So in surrounding himself with coordinators, he's the head coach, and both coordinators are Oregon State alums and very good at what they do. Ryan Gunderson on offense, Keith Hayward on defense, and his offensive line coach, Kyle Devan, that important position. Kyle's off to a great start, former Beaver, former Super Bowler with the Indianapolis Colts. Kyle Devan is really bringing the offensive line along well, and the Beavers' run game shows it. So I think Trent and his staff, again, under all of these swirling circumstances, have kept they've stayed locked in on the most important job, and that is developing these young men, coaching them up, developing their skills, and they're off to a 4-1 start. I don't think we could have asked for much more than that.
You mentioned the transfer portal. Now, Giovanni McCoy, Wolfpack fans are familiar with, because last year with Idaho, McCoy came to Mackey, threw for 313 yards, 2 touchdowns, and Idaho beat Nevada rather soundly. He has, just judging by the statistics, been quite a solid addition at quarterback. I guess the yardage isn't eye-popping, but you guys run the ball so well.
Right.
Looks like he's doing exactly what needs to be done at the quarterback position for Oregon State.
And probably what needs to be done, the definition of that is going to change a little bit as the season evolves. Teams are stacking the box and trying to slow down the Beavers' run game. And to some extent, here and there they have. But it's a pretty versatile rushing game, with Giovanni himself being a big part of it. He's not throwing it as much as he did, as you're alluding to, when he was with Idaho, but he hasn't needed to. It strikes me, though, that when he's needed to, and the Beavers have had a couple of drives, and one in particular this past game against Colorado State, where the game's on the line, and he had to make some throws, and he did. And you've seen it, so you know he's capable. That 300-yard game that you talk about, I think we may see one of those this year. He had a lot of them when he was with the Vandals. He hasn't needed to have one of those yet, but I think it's in him. I think he's got a good arm. He dropped in a beautiful pass against Colorado State that was dropped. I mean, it's just a flat-out drop when he made a big-time throw that we all saw. Ooh, that's in there. He can push the ball downfield without question. The receiving room is developing and growing as well. So right now, Giovanni and that Beaver rushing attack with fly sweeps on the edge, with Giovanni with the speed option, with Anthony Hankerson, a very capable running back, picking up some loading it with Jam Griffin status uncertain. So as long as you can run the ball effectively, and the Beavers have been able to, Giovanni hasn't had to go too far, much deeper into the playbook. But teams are going to make the Beavers do that. I think Giovanni will respond well when that happens.
One last thing about this matchup. How do you think it plays out? Are both teams really just going to run right at each other? I mean, selfishly, that means a nice quick game for the broadcasters.
Yeah, John, I am. There have been a couple of articles in our press in the state of Oregon, the Beavers State, by the way, as you know. Having lived in it, you know it. It's technically the Beaver State, and that's how we all view it in our world. There have been a couple of articles by columnists and beat writers and so on who said, well, good for the Beavs to be 4-1, but it's not exciting football. Now, I disagree with that utterly. To me, the
4-1
excitement
is exciting.
There you go. That's absolutely right. The excitement is in the winning. And if somebody would say to me, would you rather be 1-4 throwing 60, 70-yard touchdown passes and, even an air raid attack that's fast and furious and you're losing games 55-51 or winning 21-0, 38-21. Now we had 39-31, albeit in double overtime, whatever. Whatever the formula to winning, that's where the excitement is. And so I understand to each his own. And, if there are certain aesthetes of the game of football who would like to see more variety, fine. But the atmospherics at Reser Stadium and the student section that's come out in huge numbers for all the home games, even before school started, and it tells me that the product right now, what's being offered on the field is exciting enough to keep students in, and the CW ratings that we had for the past game was the most watched CW college football game this season in any market, just under 1 million at the peak of viewership. So I think the style of play has been compelling to me. But to your point, I think both teams have shown the ability to run the football. The quarterbacks are interesting, aren't they? I mean, Brendan Lewis, the Beavers know him from a 3-touchdown game that he delivered against the Beavers in Colorado in a Buffalo's win 3 years ago in Boulder. He's dangerous. And so is Giovanni McCoy. If they run it a lot, I think they're both capable throwers, but if they run it a lot and both teams run it a lot, that's fine with me. I look forward to it.
He is Mike Parker, play-by-play voice, Oregon State Athletics, a scholar, a gentleman, one of our great friends, and lovely to catch up with Mike. Terrence Newman, Mountain West Insider, joins us now. Terrence and I talked about the Wolfpack's close miss at San Jose State and undeniable progress despite the 2-4 record posted by the Pack thus far. Here's Terrence. Mountain West Insider Terrence Newman. Nevada had another close loss at San Jose State last week. Just a magnificent game. There may have been more important games. There have been more important games that I've covered in the Mountain West since I've been with the Wolfpack. But, that game, there was a perfect kind of symmetry to that game. And, it was tied 4 times and each team had 3 separate leads. Just a great ball game. But I keep coming back to how many of those close losses can you endure as a squad before you internalize the disappointment? Because you want to say next game, we're close, we're right on the brink. And in fact, they have won a close game. I want to push back on that narrative. Nevada does have a win in a close game already. But you played the game. How does that kind of work emotionally for the team?
It can work. It's a double-edged sword. It can cut a couple of ways. It can start to demoralize the team, all these close losses. But it can also kind of galvanize the team. And knowing that you can hang with some of these teams, knowing that you're competitive in every game. And honestly, for this team, I think it's it's more galvanizing than it is heartbreaking for them. Especially coming off of last year, where just being within 10 points of a team was almost like a moral victory last year. This year, you can make the legit argument, other than Minnesota, they could have won every game. And we've gotten farther along in the season, as you look back at some of those teams and some of those early games, how good does that SMU loss look now? Now that SMU is one of the leaders in the ACC. SMU beat both of the teams in the ACC that played in the ACC championship game last year. They beat Louisville and Florida State. Nevada was right there with them the whole game. The Georgia Southern loss, there's no shame in that loss. That is a very good team. That team took Boise State to the brink, okay?
Minnesota loss doesn't look as bad either now.
That Minnesota loss does not look nearly as bad as it did in the time. Looking at what they just did last week against USC. Mm-hmm. I think when it's all said and done, we look back at it, San Jose State's probably going to be one of the top 3 teams in the Mountain West. I could easily see the top 3 being some combination of Boise State, UNLV, San Jose State. You pick the order, So I don't know if that's going to be such a bad loss at the end of the day. I think these guys are going to get confidence from this because they understand the level of talent they're playing against. And they know that they took that team to the last drive. And in their minds, they're probably thinking, we had that team. And I do. Every week I see them play, despite what the record says, I'm seeing a team that is getting better. I'm seeing a team that is playing more confidently. I'm seeing a team that is playing more cohesively. I remember I texted you during the game. I text you a lot during the game.
I love it. Mike and I both get a lot of texts. We love it.
But I did. I text you saying that this is one of the best games I've watched of the Pack, one of the most entertaining games I've watched them play in the last couple of years. And I thought it was the best game Brandon Lewis has played as a member of the Wolfpack.
I thought that was one of the finest quarterbacking performances I've seen by a Nevada quarterback.
Yeah. So while on the scoreboard it's a loss, I believe that there is confidence that this team is gaining. There's a swagger that this team is starting to gain. There's a belief in themselves and a belief in what this coaching staff is doing that is going to start to pay off later on in the season, and especially going into next season. We've talked about this many times. You can't judge this year by the record. You have to judge it by the progress you see. And every week I'm seeing progress.
Choate came out, Coach Choate afterwards said he should have gone for it on fourth down. Nevada had it fourth and about 3.5 at the 39 of San Jose State with 3 and change left. They're up 31-28. So possession was victory at that point. Choate, I thought correctly, ran a minute off the clock or almost down to 2:27 or something, took a 5-yard delay of game penalty and punted it back. So the Spartans got it at their own 20-yard line. But with below 2:30 to go, your defense has stopped San Jose State 2 of the last 3 drives, and you're leading 31-28, and San Jose State has had their starting quarterback come out of the game due to an apparent injury. I think that's the right play. He later said, I should have gone for it. I think, and I said this on the coach's show last night in front of him, I said, I think that is Jeff Choate taking the blame for the loss away from his players. But I thought the punt call there was the more prudent call. Did you have thoughts on that decision?
In the moment, I agreed with the call too.
Yeah.
It had been a back and forth game all game, but the Nevada defense had made some big stops. And honestly, we're looking back at it. Trick plays are plays too, Right.
But they had to have.
But it took a trick play for them to get that touchdown.
Yeah.
It's not like they just boom, 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 10 plays, 7 yards a pop, just
That's
drove
exactly
right down the field on them. It took a big chunk trick play to get that final touchdown. But
that's exactly how I saw it. I mean, San Jose State had to have kind of back-to-back stand-on-your-head plays to get that score.
Yeah. So that's why I don't really fault him for that. I think if you had to do it over again, I do think that was the right call.
But how about him getting out front? So so he takes the blame. I mean, I find that to be rather courageous leadership.
Oh, that's the type of stuff that a good coach does, and that's the type of stuff that his players in his locker room notice, and that's why you're starting to see a team that has belief in their coaching staff and the game plan that they're putting for them, and that's why they're going out there and they're playing hard and they're running through walls for them. One of the biggest signs of growth I've seen on this team is what happened after that touchdown. You've been following this team for a while, John. You've been working with them. If we were in that situation last year, they get the ball back, it's a 3 and out.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a 4 and out, and the game's over. They probably don't even get a first down. The fact that they got the ball, moved the ball down the field, and got into a position to take shots at the end zone at the end of the game is just showing me that there is progression happening in this offense. It is evolving. The Eastern Washington game was probably the best offensive game they've had. And then they came back against San Jose State, and I'd say they played even better offensively given the level of competition they were playing against. And so, those are all positive signs that every week you're seeing a team that is getting better.
All right, so Oregon State this week, they've got the sixth best rushing average in the nation per game. They rush for over 264 yards a game. They're number one in time of possession. Styles make fights, Coach Newman. I mean, don't blink or you might miss this game. This game might be over in like 2.5 hours.
No, I was looking at the stats, and this game's almost like the Spider-Man meme of the two
It's
Spider-Mans
you.
pointing at each other.
Yeah, right.
Because
Right.
when you think about what Nevada wants to do and what they're trying to do with their team, it's a lot like what Oregon State does with their team. It's a team built on running the ball and playing defense, controlling the clock and getting timely stops. They have a good quarterback, more of a dual threat, doesn't really put the ball up in the air as much. Um, no, this is, I'd say, out of the two Pac-12's teams, I'd say Washington State's probably the better one this year so far. Oregon State was definitely hit the hardest with the transfer portal last year after the demise of the Pac, but they have done a pretty decent job of retaining some talent, especially on the defense side of the ball.
And they are
But
4-1, Coach. They did beat Purdue. They did beat San Diego State. They shut out San Diego State.
yeah, but see, here's the thing: like we were talking about with the Pac, records don't always tell the whole story. They are 4-1, but Purdue's probably the worst Power Four team in America right
Noted.
now.
Right.
Um, they got blown out by Oregon. They didn't keep
Yeah.
it close. I mean, they got blown out. And we saw with Boise State that you can keep it close with Oregon. So,
So you're saying this might be a slightly inflated 4-1 for Oregon State?
I think it's a slightly inflated 4-1. I saw a little bit of their game against Colorado State last week. They could very easily be 3-2. That was it took double overtime. Colorado State could have had them. Could have easily had them. They opened up against Idaho State, I believe.
Yeah, they did.
And they won the game, but it wasn't.
Yes, 38-15, not a landslide.
Oregon beat them worse than they beat Idaho State.
Okay.
So just
Noted.
So the record I think might be a little inflated. I do not think they're not a 4-1. They're not a team. They're not a one-loss team at the end of the year. Put it this way: they're not going to make it through this Mountain West schedule unscathed. There's going to be a Mountain West team that knocks them off, maybe even two.
Just a glimpse of the future, or what is now the present. Oregon State's schedule after the win over Purdue. So since the calendar has shifted to October, this is Oregon State. A double overtime win over Colorado State, at Nevada, home against UNLV, at Cal, home against San Jose State, at Air Force, home against Washington State, and at Boise State. I mean, that is the new reality in the West in college football. That's not a terrible. I mean, it's not the old Pac-12, but if I'm Oregon State, I think I can live with that.
Oh, I think they can their fan base will totally live with that schedule.
Yeah.
They would love a schedule like that. Yeah, as you read off those teams, they're probably losing 3 of those games.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, they're not winning at Boise State.
Nope.
They're not winning at Cal. And UNLV might beat them in Corvallis.
Yeah, I don't think they're beating UNLV either. So.
San Jose State will give them a game in Corvallis.
And I think this week's game is going to be more of a toss-up than people think. I think Nevada is closer to Colorado State in talent than people think, especially the way they've been playing this year. Yeah.
Okay. Any final thoughts about the Oregon State matchup? We'll preview. You're going to do your midway report next week.
Yeah, next week we'll have the halfway grades for all the teams in the Mountain West. Yeah, like I said, this is if this was a Styles pick fights or what's the saying?
Styles make fights.
Styles make fights. Well, these are both the same styles, so this should be a slugfest. If you like defense, if you like old school ground and pound, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, this is going to be the game for you. Excited to see B-Lou come back. Like we said, I thought he played probably the best game of his career last week. They didn't get the win, but I don't know. I just feel like he's got to be brimming with confidence.
Thank you to Mountain West insider Terrence Newman. Thank you to Oregon State play-by-play voice Mike Parker. This has been Ramey's pregame pod. You will hear edited versions of these conversations during our Bud Light Tailgate show. You can listen live on 105.7 FM on terrestrial radio here in Northern Nevada. You can watch our Behind the Mic cam during the ball game on the Nevada Facebook page, the official Wolfpack Facebook page. And you can listen live online to the audio on the varsitynetwork.com. So a lot of ways to take in Mike Edwards, Alex Margulies, and me covering Oregon State and Nevada, 4:30 kickoff, airtime at 3:30 Pacific on this Saturday. Thanks for hanging out for Ramey's pregame pod. Go Pack. Talk to you soon.